So just like you said, who's to say it's half gone? And why should we care if it is? We still have half of it left. You may be sitting out there going, I don't have kids, I'm not going to have kids, and I've got plenty of oil for the rest of my life. What's the deal? I don't really care. Well, that's where a guy named M.K. Hubbard came in. Anybody ever heard of Hubbard's Peak or peak oil? Or it's been around a lot. Anybody know what it is? Hopefully not, because then I can say this and you can't tell me I'm wrong. So M.K. Hubbard was a guy who worked for Shell Oil in the 50s, and he had a really great haircut that was sort of like square and funky. But he worked for Shell in the 50s, and he was down in the office downstairs using his slide rule or whatever and doing a bunch of calculations, and he kind of had an aha moment one day, and he went up to the head of Shell and he knocked on the door, and the guy had his lunch in his hand and said, what do you want? And he said, I think we have a problem. And he said, what are you talking about? He said, I think in the 1970s the United States is going to have a serious problem with oil. And the guy finished his burrito or whatever he was eating and said, you're a great guy to have at parties, but go back downstairs because you're nuts and there's plenty of oil and da-da-da. Well, what MK had hit on was the fact that 150 million years to make it, regardless of how much is left, it's being used, it's not going to be replenished. And he came up with the idea of Hubbard's Peak. Now, just jumping ahead quickly, I don't know what the average age is in here. Do many of you remember, or were you alive during the oil embargo in the 70s, or do you know what it is? Okay, in West Hartford, Connecticut, where Andy and I grew up, you could only fit, well, our parents could only fill up their cars on alternate days of the week. Like if you had a 7 on your license plate, I don't know what they did out here, so 7 on your license plate, you could fill up on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and if you had a 6 on your license plate, you could fill up the other days. So they were miles long, miles long. There was no oil to be had, and everybody kind of freaked out, and it happened pretty quickly. Now, there were a lot of political reasons why it happened, but after the fact, once they started importing more oil and getting more in the reserves, and the government did things to make everybody go, it's okay, it's fine. Your 59-cent a gallon oil, which is what it costs back, or gasoline, which is what it costs back there, is back, and you can get it whenever you want. The head of Shell said, hey, let's go down to the basement and talk to Hubbard again, because maybe we should have listened to him. And he said, Hubbard, what's the deal? And Hubbard said, well, this is what I was trying to tell you. I came up with this idea of the peak. And I'm calling it Hubbard's Peak because I like my last name and I have a funky haircut. So you really should check it out because he's got a great haircut. So over here on the left-hand side, and I think I have a pointer. Hey, I have a pointer. Over here on the left-hand side is where there was nothing, okay? Nothing in the ground, no petroleum. Coming over here is where it's all gone. Now, obviously, over here is you get a big problem because it's all gone, right? But Hubbard said the point where you have a big problem is here in the center. And he said basically at the point where we get to the 50% mark is where we're going to start to feel it. And it's going to be painful. And slowly it's going to continue to be used up after that because it's going to become so much harder and so much more expensive to get it at that point that we're going to have a problem. And he said, that's what happened here last year. I don't know when they talked to him. And they said, well, do you have any other thoughts for us, perhaps, that you could share? And he said, yeah, I've basically been sitting down here angry in the basement doing my calculations. And the number that I've come up with for the entire planet is 2010. And he said, 2010, we're going to hit peak oil. And they said, and he looked at him and they said, okay, we didn't say that, actually. Okay, fine, we'll listen this time. And they said, how are you certain? He said, well, I'm not, because I don't know what population is going to be, and I don't know what wars are going to happen, and I don't know this and that and the other. I could be off by 10 years, but I'm telling you, the point was 150 million years to make it, we're using it, it's going to hit the peak, and when we hit the peak, we're going to be in trouble. Now the question is, why is hitting the peak in the trouble? Let's go back to all the oil on the planet. Really great circle that I made on my computer, I was very proud of it. If this is all the oil on the planet, oil companies exist, like most corporations, to make money, and there's nothing wrong, and that's why they exist, but that's one of the things they're very into. They like to make money. Okay? So they're going to get oil out of the ground the easiest and most economical way possible, right? It makes sense. I'm not a business major. I hope nobody in here is a business major because you could totally prove me wrong. But I think that's the way it generally works. That was sort of funny. You here? Everybody here? Okay. All right, anyway. So as they take it out of the ground, I made this one too, what happens is they take the top stuff first. Do you guys have In-N-Out Burger up here? Okay, so you know In-N-Out milkshakes? Crazy, like they shouldn't even be called milkshakes, they're like basically ice cream in a thing, right? Okay, I don't know about you, but when I go to get one of those, I jam the straw in here. My wife always laughs at me. I take a big suck and my whole face goes into the thing because it's like crazy thick, right? You know what I'm talking about. Well, the first thing that you do if you're like me because you're greedy is you take it up to the top and you start sucking off the top. Why? Because it's easy to get at and you don't have to suck your whole face in, and then your wife's not saying, I told you so, even though she is anyway, but that's another story. So Oil is pretty much very simplistically like the big in-and-out milkshake, okay? And this is actually, I think, the way that Hubbard explained it, but I'm not absolutely positive. I may have gotten some facts wrong. But generally speaking, they're going to get it the easiest way out possible. So then you say, okay, that makes sense. Everything you made sense. How do we know we're at peak oil? Maybe you're lying. Maybe people are telling you the truth. Well, let's look at a couple of things. British Petroleum. Everybody know the big green whatever? Okay, very, very slowly over time, British Petroleum has gone from British Petroleum to British Power to Beyond Power. Okay, they've changed their logo from an oil drop to a sunflower. Okay, big deal, Dave. They got a new art director in the company, whatever. They also bought Siemens, which is the largest maker of solar panels in the world. They may not be today because some things have happened, but they're pretty big. They actually made the solar panels that are on our house. So here's my question. If you're BP and you've got more oil than you know what to do with, and everybody needs that oil, and they want that oil, and they got to come back, and it's cheap, and it's not going to run out. Why are you doing all these things, and why are you investing in a solar company that basically doesn't make money? Because my solar panels I paid for once, and 40 years from now, 60 years from now, I may have to pay for again, but it doesn't make money like oil. That doesn't make sense from a corporate point of view. Okay? Another thing, the Ghawar oil field is the largest oil field in the world. It's in Saudi Arabia. Presently in the Ghawar oil field, they pump in 7 million gallons of seawater every single day just to get that oil up to the surface so they can get it out cheaply. 7 million gallons of seawater in the middle of the desert, it's got to cost a fair amount of money. If this stuff is plentiful and easy to get, why are they doing that? So again, you could say, Dave, there could be this reason, there could be that reason, there could be that reason. I hope nobody here is from Scandinavia because I'm about to completely massacre a name here. But about 3 weeks ago, I think, and again, you can read this on the links that I have set up for you. I'm going to try this. Jeroen van der Veer, hopefully I said that right, who is the CEO of Shell, sent out a letter saying we are 7 years away from peak oil. This is a man whose job it is to run a company that gets oil out of the ground. And he's saying we're 7 years away from the big one. We got a problem. So between all that, as far as I'm concerned, peak oil is 7 to 10 years away. And it really doesn't even make a difference if it's 7 to 10 years away, because 150 million years, we're eventually going to get to a problem. Laurie David, who's a very big environmentalist, once said, and I love this, you can hit the wall at 100 miles an hour or you can hit it at 5 miles an hour. I personally would like to hit it at 5 miles an hour or not at all. 100 miles an hour doesn't seem that interested to me.